Since July of 2011, Jeff Katz has served as the Dean of Western Kentucky University's Gordon Ford College of Business. He's a full professor of management and former Fulbright scholar whose teaching and research focus on global competitors, strategic decision-making, and corporate governance. Dr. Katz obtained his doctorate from the University of Florida's Warrington College of Business. He's a past president of the Midwest Academy of Management and currently serves on both boards of the Academy of Management Perspectives Journal and the Mid-American Business Deans Association. Furthermore, I'm proud to call him not only my dean, but also a mentor and a dear friend. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Jeffrey Katz.
Thank you. Mr. Griffin Frugier, thank you, Griffin. Wonderful. I really appreciate it. What a wonderful role model for all of us. Griffin is an avid traveler, one of our ambassadors, has visited some 20 countries in the last few years, and serves our college very well. We have two global leaders from the food industry with us today. Iconic companies, the Hershey Foods Company and the Kroger Company. Two friends to join us on the podium to talk about food and to provide lessons of leadership. I'd like to take a couple of minutes to thank individuals that made today possible and for all of you to be here with us today. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Cecile Garman, whose idea it was, our director of the Center for Leadership Excellence, to have this happen today. Thank you, Cecile. I'd like to thank Ms. Leslie Saracen, the president and CEO of the Food Marketing Institute, who is involved with our program today. Thank you for being here with us, Leslie. I'd like to thank the best university president in America today, Dr. Gary Ransdell, for being here with us. We appreciate it very much, Dr. Ransdell. Of course, I'd like to recognize Mr. Hayes Watkins, a Bowling Green Business University graduate that made this lecture series possible. Christina Harvey, my executive assistant, who's been working all the details, and Stacy Gish, our director of communications, has been involved with all the material and the videotaping of this event today. I'd like to recognize some special attendees as well. Mr. Rick Wilson, President, Area Executive of BB&T Bank, who serves as a president, the chairman of our Business Executive Advisory Council. Rick, in the front row, thank you so much. We have several Business Executive Advisory Council members who've traveled from quite a distance to be with us today. I'd like them to stand and be recognized. Please stand up if you would and be recognized on our council. We meet tomorrow and talk about the College of Business. Thank you so much. Mr. Rick DeBose, the Executive Director of the WKU Alumni Association. Rick, are you there? Thank you so much for being here and supporting us. Rick's doing a wonderful job with our Alumni Association. I understand we have some members of the Kroger family. Would you raise your hand and stand up and be recognized if you're a Kroger employee, a Kroger lover? There they are. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. You feed my family every week. Thank you so much. I'd like to also recognize Dr. Gordon Bayless, our Vice President for Research, is here somewhere in the audience. Dr. Bayless, thank you for being with us. You know, as a best applied college of business in the Commonwealth, in my humble opinion, we have a world-class college that provides real-world learning experiences. And we are delighted to have you here today to be exposed to a real-world, wonderful global leader. But first, I'd like to introduce you to a member of our advisory council from Hershey Foods, a graduate of our program, who will introduce our featured speaker. Mr. Tom Joyce is Vice President, Global Consumer Industry Affairs of the Hershey Company. He is responsible for building and maintaining relationships with Hershey's customers globally and also in their global trade operations. He represents the company extremely well in his 38-year career. And it all started right here in Grice Hall. Tom is a graduate of Western Kentucky University, where he received his bachelor's degree in marketing. He is a 5-time recipient of Hershey's President's Club, and he was inducted into National Confectionery Association's Candy Hall of Fame. That's got to be an honor, the Candy Hall of Fame. He's also Convenience Store News Hall of Fame inductee in 2010. Clearly a food industry leader, and we're delighted to have him associated as a graduate of our program. Please welcome Mr. Tom Joyce to the podium.
You know, that dream you have when you wake up and you think you forgot to go to an exam, well, it lasts about 30 years. And so, I swear to God it does. So when I walked in here, it reminded me that I used to have exams in here. And so it's a little scary feeling right now, but I did get my degree, so thank you. Thank you, Dr. Katz, and good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here today to introduce you to a very special individual and leader. I want to thank Dr. Katz and Dr. Cecile Garman for their help in getting me re-engaged with the university. After graduating from Western, I've spent the last 39 years working at the Hershey Company. My current position is Vice President, Global Customer and Industry Affairs. I would not be here today or could have possibly enjoyed the success that I have experienced without the foundation that was built here for me at Western. With education, anything is truly possible. Today, it is my honor to introduce the 2014 Hayes Watkins Visiting CEO Speaker, Dave Dillon. Dave is currently chairman of the board of the Kroger Company. Kroger is based in Cincinnati and currently operates over 3,500 supermarkets, convenience, and jewelry stores under 24 banners. The company currently employs over 343,000 employees. Dave grew up in the grocery business. His great-grandfather, J.S. Dillon, started J.S. Dillon Cash Food Market in Hutchinson, Kansas in 1913. After much success and numerous acquisitions, in 1968, J.S. Dillon and Sons had grown into Dillon Companies, Inc. In 1983, the Dillon Companies were acquired by the Kroger Company, creating a nationwide chain. Dave attended the University of Kansas, where he was student body president and initiated into Sigma Chi. He then received his law degree from Southern Methodist University. Dave joined the Dillon Company in 1976 at their King Soopers division in Denver. He held various leader positions at Fry's Food Stores and Dillon Companies before being named president of the Dillon Companies in 1986. He was appointed executive vice president of Kroger in 1990, elected president and chief operating officer in 1995, CEO in 2003, and chairman of the board in 2004. In 2013, Dave announced his retirement from Kroger, but will remain chairman through the end of 2014. I've spent my career selling Hershey bars to Kroger grocery stores and convenience stores, and recently have had the opportunity to spend time with Dave at industry events. He is truly one of the most admired and successful leaders in our industry. At a recent trade event, Dave was recognized for his support and participation in the Boy Scouts of America. Dave and his father, Paul, were both involved in Boy Scout Troop 301 in Hutchinson, Kansas, where Dave earned the Boy Scouts' highest rank of Eagle Scout. When you understand the Kroger Company values of honesty, integrity, respect of others, diversity, safety, and inclusion, you also understand the values of Dave Dillon. Please join me in welcoming our guest speaker, Mr. Dave Dillon.
Thank you, Tom. So, Tom, thank you. I've known Tom for a long time. Is this, I have this turned on properly? Okay, doesn't sound like it. I got green, so what do you think? I want to make sure you all hear me. Is it coming through the speaker at all? No? Sure. Yeah, very sensitive. I thought I was a sensitive guy. Maybe not. So where do
Try
you
clipping a little bit higher.
higher than on my collar?
Yeah, well, higher than the bottom.
How about a nose
collar.
ring? No, where
Shall we?
No,
Yeah?
just put it where you want. That's fine. I'll make it work.
There we go.
Okay. Can you hear me all right? Okay, that's better. All right, thank you. He was right. He told me this was a sensitive mic, and I didn't take him seriously. So I try not to take myself too seriously, and so I want to make sure you know we're fairly crowded in here. This is a working university. Some of you have to step out for classes and other things, so feel free to do that with this door or any of the doors. I don't mind the disruption. In fact, I prefer to speak at a place that is active like this, and am really appreciative to have the chance to come here. I'm going to step over here so I'm not in the light. I've not been to campus before. I've been to Bowling Green before because it's an important market for Kroger, but I'd not been up to campus, and I really appreciate the chance to see this campus. It's quite remarkable, and I can see why many of you have decided to come here as students. It's a terrific place. So I plan to take you on a journey, a little like what Tom shared. Tom, I appreciated that. I've known Tom a long time, and these stories, well, I kind of wondered who that person was and what they'd have to say, so we'll see. But I want to take you on a journey to tell you a little bit more about Kroger, some things you may not know. And I want to draw some leadership and business and marketing comparisons so you have a sense of what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it, and some of the lessons we've learned along the way. So I hope you find that to be of interest. But first, let me start by telling you Kroger is 131 years old. Now that may not seem significant to you, but in a minute, you'll see that if you're that old, would be true for all of us, you had to change a lot of times to be successful. I mean, many of you don't even know a time before there were cell phones. And we were in business before there were really even telephones. So it's a changing business, and you'll see some really good examples of that. But first, Kroger is very committed to Kentucky and to Bowling Green. And I put a few snippets here that I thought would be interesting. In this community, we're home to 3 stores. I was at one of them this morning. I love the stores. In fact, all 3 have had some recent remodel work to try to connect better with the customers in this community. You can see we have Country Oven Bakery here, and that bakery really serves the entire Kroger company all over the U.S. They do lots of products. Many of the cakes that you would see in our stores are starting their journey there. And terrific folks there. We do an awful lot in the community, too. We have participated in this community, as you can see here, with our food drives, over 10,000 pounds of food to area food banks just last year. And beyond that, our commitment to Kentucky, you can see here our capital expenditures in this state have been about $150 million over the last 4 years. So that's a significant step to invest in this area because it's important to us. You'll also see that we try to participate in the communities that we serve. Our florist department is the group that puts together the rose garland for the winner of the Kentucky Derby. And we participated in the program here, the Shop and Share, that your First Lady in the state of Kentucky came up with for us to try to help support some important causes throughout the state of Kentucky. But more on that in a little while. So let me talk more about Kroger and give you a little background so that you can get a sense of some of the illustrations that I want to share with you, some of the stories. This is a timeline that represents the length of time Kroger has been around, starting back with Barney Kroger in 1883. And I don't have a lot of stories about Barney except that he started, as most retailers, with a store and with an idea. And it's not the same as the stores look today. In fact, the stores are radically different today than what he would have imagined. So let me jump ahead to the 1930s. In the 1930s, Kroger had 5,500 stores. Today, if you look at our food stores, leaving the convenience stores and jewelry stores and things out, we have about half that many. So I've often thought about the decision that somebody made at Kroger to work backwards and say, I'm going to get rid of these extra stores and go to something smaller, or something bigger rather, and get rid of the smaller stores. Now, all of us, when we look back at that, would say, well, that's pretty obvious. You can't have a food store that's the size of what the stores were in 1930. It makes no sense. You can't carry the product you need. You couldn't even fit a meat department in that kind of a store. So that's an obvious choice from our point of view. But thinking about it from the point of view of the people running Kroger at that time. Kroger was very successful. Kroger was batting it out of the ballpark. And some harebrained executive walks into a meeting and says, you know, I think we need fewer stores. Now, I don't know many retailers who intentionally go to fewer stores. But somebody had the wisdom to know that we needed bigger stores, that the stores, in order to get better pricing, had to have more volume, to have better assortment, had to have more space. And without those bigger stores, we would not have had a future. But somebody made the decision to take us there. If you go to the 1950s, an interesting parallel. In 1950, A&P, how many of you have heard of A&P? It was a grocery chain. Some of you, but many of you have not. And there's a reason for that. A&P in 1950 had as much market share, actually twice as much market share, as Walmart has today in food. And Walmart is the biggest in the United States for food. And in my lifetime working in the grocery industry, I thought no one had ever dominated food like Walmart is dominating food today. I mean, it's amazing to me. A&P in 1950 had twice the market share across the United States in food. Today, they went through a recent bankruptcy, merged with Pathmark in order to try to have some life. And their stores are basically around New York, and that's about all that's left of them. It happens when you're big to make wrong choices, you go down and spiral down. But if you're big and make right choices, you actually get bigger because you connect better with customers. So a retailer, the whole world of retailers revolve around trying to connect better with our customers, become relevant to our customers. And that will be important in just a minute as I tell you a little bit more about the story. In the 1980s and 1990s, we did a number of things, one of which was, and many of us check all of our current history at Kroger beginning in 1988, we did a leveraged transaction. Some of you probably studied what those look like. It's like an LBO, only in our case, we didn't buy the company. We just paid a really big dividend to the shareholders, and we left them holding the highly leveraged stock called stub stock. And that stock price, if you adjust for splits and so forth, would have been then about $2 a share, maybe even a little less. Today, we're trading at $44 plus a little. So you can see the change from that time period. So that was a really tough time, and that defined a lot of what we did through the 80s and 90s. Dillon's, as you heard earlier, was acquired by Kroger in 1983. That's when I became part of Kroger. At that time, I wasn't actually sure that Kroger would have a home for me. I kind of thought maybe I ought to go do something different because, Kroger is a big company, and I didn't think they would really look to the companies they acquired for any kind of leadership talent. But interestingly enough, the next two CEOs at Kroger both came from the acquisition of Dillon companies. My boss then, Joe Pickler, and then I followed Joe as CEO of Kroger. So it's an interesting story how Kroger opened its arms to a company they acquired and welcomed us into part of the organization. But in addition to that, we through the 1990s, we lost a lot of market share. We did that because Walmart was building all the supercenters. They have one of those here. And so you've seen them. And you know what kind of force they are. They're really dominant. And at that time, in the 1990s, they were cheaper in product price than we were. And we let that happen to us. We made the mistake of trying to earn money by raising prices in the 1990s. But that came to an abrupt halt as we started building bigger stores and realizing that we had to change. To give you a sense of the size of stores, the first store I worked in was 15,000 square feet, and at that time, it was actually a reasonably large store. The stores today, the largest store in Kentucky today for us is in Independence, Kentucky, and it is just shy of 125,000 square feet. And our stores here, while a little bit smaller than that, are still substantially better and bigger than the 15,000. So at this time, we decided we needed to have bigger stores, a better presence, and really make ourselves felt by the customers and become more relevant again. And so this is more a story about how we did that and some of the management lessons that I've learned along the way. So you'll see here the two biggest steps were deciding what our core values were and deciding what our strategy was going to be. And in this case, customer first was the choice. And there's an important lesson in that. We were a reasonably new management team, top management team. I'd become CEO the year before. And we said to ourselves, I said to myself, I wonder how many people in our organization think that because they have a new CEO, that the values of this organization are different than they were yesterday with the old CEO. And I tried to think of some good way to reinstill to the organization that our values are going to stay the same. But we didn't have a typed list of values. We just sort of knew what they were. And as a result, we decided that we needed to codify them, write them out, describe what they are, and to demonstrate by our actions that we were going to keep our values strong in the organization. So let me tell you a little bit about those first. I'll describe just a couple of them. There are these 6 values. Tom, I think, went through the list for you so you'd have an idea. Some of them are pretty obvious: honesty and integrity, respect, safety, diversity. Sure. That's important to us. And many of our associates are really engaged and aligned to help deliver on that. Now, Usain Bolt's objective was to win that race and have the world record, which he has. Now, how did he do that? He didn't do it just by himself. Now, sometimes, obviously, they have trainers and people who help them figure out what to eat at the training table, and that's part of their team. But expand that. Look what's happened in footwear, in athletic footwear and running shoes, how that's changed. And look at the surfaces of the track today. They are different, and they've helped sprinters be faster. Those changes came about as a team effort from people who work on those topics. And you could argue that that's the team that brought Usain Bolt to the place that he is. And while we're judging this at this point in time, and we see him as the world record holder and the #1 in the 100-meter dash, somebody's going to beat that. Just as 20 years ago, we saw somebody else as the #1 leader. So I wrote down on my notes the first time I saw this a few lessons that I thought were worth noting. And I want to refer to this because I think it's important to get a few of these. So I think this illustrates, to me, it illustrates the value of a team, the value of feedback to a team so that they can improve every year. The USA, I don't think it's by chance that most of the runners up there were from the USA. And I think that's because the USA is a competitive environment, and in a good way. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that we are always striving to see if we can't be just a little bit better than we were yesterday. And not all cultures of other countries are that way. I think that's one of the reasons that the U.S. stands out in this particular race. Repeats are rare. On the stage, there were only 3 people who'd been up there more than once in previous Olympics. Now, that's rather interesting, because that means that just because you're at the top today, you are unlikely to stay at the top tomorrow. And yet Kroger, 131 years old, has been able to do that. The difference is in a corporation, that the whole idea of a corporation is that it has life over time, that it allows you to continue to have business even when the individual proprietor who maybe started it quits, retires, dies, whatever. The business doesn't have to end then. That's why one of the reasons we invented corporations. The other is to be able to develop capitalization, but that'll be another speech sometime. But the value we have in that is that we can, in corporations, be #1 all the time. But you can only be #1 all the time if you are constantly changing who you are. So really, Usain Bolt can't repeat himself, and in fact, Kroger can't repeat itself either. But other people at Kroger can repeat themselves by being even better. I love the story about the 15 and 16-year-olds being enough to qualify for third in the 1980s. That's very special. That tells you how much athletes have improved over time. But the most important part to me is how all the elements need to be aligned to have victory. And that really talks to me a lot about teamwork and about shared mission. The world has changed an awful lot. And as it changes, as the track surfaces change, as the shoes change, as our understanding of nutrition change, and you need to change what you eat or the way in which you train, all of that as it develops, you have to have new information and constantly evolving your model to be able to win. Joe Pickler, who was my predecessor at Kroger, when he became the president of Kroger in 1986, he got a postcard from a friend of his in Denver, Colorado. And the postcard said, "Dear Joe, you have just heard the truth for the very last time." Yeah, I mean, I laugh at that. It's actually pretty funny until you realize how true it is. It is. Every promotion I've gotten, every single one, whether it was in the stores or in the office or in a plant, wherever I've been, every promotion, people would slightly treat me different than they did before. They would tell me a little less of what I needed to know to do my job. And often it was for innocent reasons. Sometimes it's they didn't want to bother me. They thought I was too busy. They didn't think I needed to know. They thought they could take care of it. Other times it was because they didn't want me to see it. But for whatever the reason, in an organization, in any supervisory role, one of the hardest tasks is to actually understand what's going on around. And you have to be able to use your eyes and observe, but you also have to get feedback from the organization. And so the most important lesson from this is if I was a sprinter, I would be getting all kinds of feedback data points to understand how I can improve. And I try to do that in regular, everyday living. I do it with a speech. I do it with everything I do at work. I am constantly asking people, how would you have improved what that message was? Without that feedback, I don't improve at the rate that I expect I should. And without you giving that feedback, you maybe don't improve either, because it never occurs to you that you need to get feedback just as I'm trying to get it. So I tell the story to Kroger associates all the time that I have a review annually with the board of directors just like they do with their boss. And that every time I do a review, if it's somebody reporting to me or even somebody I report to, I always ask them, how could I improve that if I changed, it would improve your ability to do your job? So imagine asking that of somebody who reports to me. They're all worried about how I'm going to see them as an employee, and I share with them how I see them, and I ask them to share with me how they see themselves, but then I ask them to share with me how they see me and how I might improve. That's unconventional feedback, and that's the kind of feedback that world-class runners have to have in order for them to actually be able to improve. The annual reviews are really important. So I think there are 4 basic lessons that I just want to touch on that all of this speaks to me on, and then I want to wrap up. The first is openness. I think in today's leadership environment, if you're not an open society within your company, within your organization, within your classroom, within whatever big or small organization you have, your family, same way. If you don't have an openness, transparency is the fancy word you hear a lot, but I think of it as just simply being open, letting people say what they genuinely believe and to not have us find fault with them for having that view. We've tried to have that at Kroger. Second is teamwork, a team that genuinely aspires to work for each other's benefit. You saw the example of dunnhumby and Kroger Personal Finance. Those are 2 examples of joint ventures we do. And those are the 2 joint ventures that taught us the difference between a partnership the way we used to use the word 20 years ago and partnership the way we use the word today. Tom would be a good example of that. With Hershey's, we have a partnership. We want them to win and they want us to win. And that's what I mean by partnership. Used to be a partnership was, can I get Hershey's to agree to do what I want them to do? I'll call it a partnership as a euphemism to convince them that I'm on their side, but I really just want what I want. Today at Kroger, we actually want to try to win by having other people win. So in Kroger Personal Finance, US Bank, they help win. In the case of dunnhumby out of the UK, they win, and we want their objectives met just like our objectives. That's what I mean by teamwork. Third is shared vision, shared mission, shared objectives. I prefer the shared mission phrase because I actually believe everybody I know, from the person doing sanitation work in our store, to the carryout, to the president of the company, everybody I know at Kroger wants to matter. They want to make a difference with the work life that they have. All of you, I think, want to matter. And the best way I know for you to be able to matter is to pick an organization, pick a lifestyle, a work world for you, where your objectives can match up with the organization's mission, the organization's purpose. So if you can have a shared purpose with the others in the organization, you'll be more effective. The organization will be more effective, and you will be loads happier. Because when you retire, as I'm retiring at the end of this year, you can look back at your job and say, you know, I actually did matter. It actually was important that I worked at Kroger all those years or somewhere else. One of the other points that I heard this morning was to remind you all that actually Kroger is a great place to work for a career. with or without a college degree, as a matter of fact. We hire lots of folks with college degrees in our management development programs and those sorts of things. And so if you share some of these missions that I'm describing of serving customers, be of service to customers, to make people's lives just a little bit lighter, we might be a place you want to talk to. And then the fourth of the four real lessons to me is feedback. And I think I've talked about feedback probably sufficiently well that I won't add more. So in a second, I'll take your questions, but I want to close in one more unconventional way. I want to share with you a poem, which I doubt is new to you. You've probably all heard it. But I want to read it for you to think about what you're going to do in your work world and in your life. In fact, I don't really distinguish between my work world and my personal world. I really look at those as one and the same. And I think as you get out into the world from school, you will as well. And so think about this poem as you think about what your life ahead might look like. This is my favorite poem by my favorite poet. It's The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. So as for that, the passing there had really warned them about the same. And both that morning equally lay, and leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood. And I, and we, all of you, and we, took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. Thank you.